He only wanted a quiet life on his ranch, until he found a wounded Apache woman bleeding in the dust. What happened next changed his destiny forever. Tell us where in the USA you're watching from. Like the video, subscribe for more Wild West stories. Let's get started. The desert sky burned crimson as the sun sank behind the distant mountains, painting the valley in blood-colored light. Samuel Granger tugged the reins of his tired horse, his eyes scanning the horizon for strays. Life had grown quiet after the war, too quiet. The cattle kept him busy, but not alive. Then near the ridge something caught his eye. A shape sprawled in the dirt, motionless. He thought it was a coyote at first, but as he drew closer, the outline became clear. A woman, her dress torn, her dark hair tangled with dust and blood. Her chest moved faintly, shallow and slow. Samuel knelt, his hand hovering over the wound near her shoulder. A bullet hole. The blood had dried in dark streaks down her arm. Her eyes flickered open, wild and fearful, like a trapped animal's. "Don't move," he said quietly, his voice steady, like he used to speak to wounded soldiers. "You're safe." But the word meant nothing to her. He could see the mistrust in her face. The West had taught her too well that men brought danger, not mercy. Still, he lifted her gently, careful not to cause more pain. The journey back to the ranch was long and silent. The woman trembled in his arms, whispering something in Apache that Samuel couldn't understand. The cold air bit at their skin as the horse trudged through the dry brush. He kept glancing behind them, his instincts sharp. A wounded Apache woman alone was no accident. Trouble followed her. He could feel it like thunder beneath the horizon. When the cabin's lantern came into view, Samuel sighed in relief, but it was a fragile piece, thin as smoke in the wind. Inside, he laid her down near the fire, his hands shaking slightly as he fetched bandages and whiskey. He'd seen worse wounds, but something about patching her up felt different. Maybe it was the way she watched him, not with gratitude, but with suspicion. Her dark eyes never left his face. He poured whiskey over the wound. She flinched but didn't cry out. "That's it," he murmured, pressing the cloth against her shoulder. "You'll live." She whispered something that sounded like a prayer or maybe a curse. He couldn't tell which. Hours passed as the storm rolled in from the east. Wind rattled the shutters, and rain began to drum against the roof. Samuel sat by the fire watching her sleep. She looked young, maybe no more than 20. Her hands were scarred, the hands of someone who'd fought and worked hard. He wondered what story lay behind those closed eyes. The war had left him numb to human suffering, but something about her stirred old memories, the kind he'd buried deep. He thought of his wife, buried years ago, and how grief had driven him into this lonely desert life. When lightning flashed, he saw her eyes open again. She stared at the fire, then at him. "Why?" she asked softly, her English broken but clear. "Why help me?" Samuel hesitated. He wasn't sure himself. Maybe he was tired of watching things die. "Because you were alone," he said simply. "No one should die alone." She blinked as if the answer surprised her. Then she whispered, "Name." He pointed to himself. "Samuel," she nodded weakly. "Naya." Her voice was barely a breath, but it carried something powerful, a name that seemed older than the land itself. By midnight, her fever broke. Samuel changed her bandage, careful not to wake her. Outside, the wind had died, leaving an uneasy calm. He stepped out onto the porch, the desert stretching endless and dark before him. Coyotes howled in the distance, but beneath their cries, another sound stirred, the low rumble of horses. Samuel's blood ran cold. He could barely see through the rain, but there, on the ridge, figures moved, their torches flickering like ghosts. Apache riders. His heart pounded. He'd heard stories of ranchers massacred for less. He turned back toward the cabin, his mind racing. Inside, Naya stirred. Her eyes met his, sensing his fear. "They come," she whispered. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Your people." She nodded slowly, then grimaced as she tried to sit up. "They think you take me prisoner," he cursed under his breath. "Well, they're wrong." He grabbed his rifle, checked the chamber, and glanced toward the window. He could see shadows shifting in the darkness now. A dozen, maybe more. "How do I tell them that?" he muttered. Naya looked at him for a long moment, her eyes burning with urgency. "No fight," she said. "Trust me." The hours before dawn stretched endlessly. Samuel sat near the door, rifle across his lap, while Naya rested by the fire. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with tension. He could hear them out there, low voices, footsteps, whispers in the dark. The Apache had surrounded his land waiting for daylight. He didn't sleep, didn't move. When he looked at her again, she was awake, her expression calm, almost serene. "If I die," she said softly, "you tell them. I'm not afraid." Samuel's throat tightened. "You're not going to die," he said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. The first light of morning crept through the window. Samuel rose, stepped onto the porch and froze. They were everywhere. Apache warriors, faces painted, bows drawn. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. Samuel's hand hovered near his rifle, but before he could speak, Naya appeared beside him, leaning heavily on the doorframe. Her voice cut through the silence like wind through pine. She spoke in her native tongue, strong, steady, unbroken. The warriors lowered their weapons. The scarred man's eyes softened as he looked at her, then at Samuel. After what felt like an eternity, the leader nodded once, turned his horse, and motioned for his men to move. One by one, the riders vanished into the desert mist. Naya swayed, exhausted. Samuel caught her before she fell. She looked up at him, her lips trembling. "They know," she said faintly. "You good man," he smiled tiredly. "Guess they saw that faster than you did." She laughed weakly, the sound small but real. As the sun rose higher, the valley seemed to breathe again. The fear that had gripped the night faded, replaced by something quiet and fragile. Understanding. For days after, Naya remained at the ranch, her strength returning with the warmth of the spring sun. She helped mend fences, gathered water, and sometimes sang by the fire in a voice soft as dusk. Samuel found himself listening, letting her songs fill the hollow spaces inside him. One evening, as he poured coffee into 2 tin cups, he said, "You can leave now if you want. I won't stop you." She smiled faintly. "I stay until Earth tells me go." He nodded. Out here, among the red rocks and silence, he'd learned not to question the desert's wisdom. That night, Samuel sat outside beneath the stars. The air smelled of sage and smoke. He thought of how a single act of kindness had nearly cost him his life, but also given it new meaning. From the shadows, Naya stepped out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. She looked at him with calm eyes, the firelight dancing in them. "You saved me," she said quietly. "No," he replied, staring toward the horizon. "We saved each other." The wind stirred again, gentle now, carrying her song across the plains. In the heart of the wild frontier, 2 strangers had found peace. The dawn came softly over the valley, painting the land in shades of gold and fire. Samuel stood in the doorway of his cabin, rifle hanging loose at his side. His breath caught when he saw them, Apache riders, dozens of them, silent and still as stone. The desert around them shimmered with early light, their painted faces reflecting the hues of the rising sun. He felt the weight of every decision that had led to this moment pressing down on his chest. He glanced back into the cabin, where the woman lay weak but awake, her dark eyes calm despite the danger. Her name, Naya, hung in his mind, like a whisper. He'd spoken it once in the night, and she had opened her eyes as though she'd heard her name carried through the wind. Now she struggled to her feet, her body trembling but determined. "Stay inside," Samuel said quietly. She shook her head. "No, they will not listen to you." Her voice was soft but carried strength. She moved to the door, her bare feet brushing against the cold wooden floor. Samuel reached for her arm to steady her, but she pulled away. "They must see me alive," she whispered. Outside, the horses snorted and shifted in the dust, their riders watching with hard eyes. Samuel felt his pulse quicken. He knew this kind of tension. It was the same before a battle. One wrong move and blood would soak the sand. But Naya stepped past him into the light. Her hair glowed like obsidian against the morning sun. She raised her hand and spoke rapidly in her native tongue, her voice rising above the wind. The warriors looked at her, disbelief flashing across their faces. Some lowered their bows. The man who seemed their leader dismounted, eyes locked on her. The leader stepped closer, his expression fierce but uncertain. Samuel recognized the same protective rage he had once carried into battle. "He helped me," Naya said, switching to English for Samuel's sake, though her breath trembled. "He did not harm." The man studied Samuel for a long moment, his gaze sharp as a blade. Samuel didn't move. He just nodded slightly, acknowledging him with the quiet respect one soldier gives another. No words passed between them, but something ancient did, an understanding born from survival, from loss, from the endless toll of the West on men's hearts. The leader lifted his chin and gave a small nod, a signal. The others followed, their weapons lowering in unison. The desert air lightened, as though it too had been holding its breath. Naya swayed where she stood, the strain finally breaking her composure. Samuel caught her before she fell, cradling her gently. The leader looked at her one last time, then at him, and turned toward his horse. Within minutes they were gone, disappearing into the horizon like ghosts of the earth itself. Only the tracks of their hooves remained, pressed deep into the morning dust. Samuel carried Naya back inside, laying her near the fire. Her breathing was ragged but steady. "They believed you," he said quietly. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "They saw truth." He poured her a cup of water, his hands still shaking. For a long moment neither spoke. The storm of the night before had left everything washed clean, the world outside glimmering with dew. Samuel looked through the window at the vast land that stretched beyond, the hills, the ridges, the endless sea of red dust, and realized it didn't feel as empty as it once had. By afternoon, the ranch was alive with quiet motion. Samuel fixed the fences that had fallen in the storm, while Naya, though still weak, insisted on helping. "You don't owe me this," he said, watching her gather small sticks for the fire. She smiled faintly. "We all owe life," she answered, "to someone." Her words stayed with him as they worked side by side, two broken lives stitched together by circumstance. When the sun dipped low again, painting the sky orange and purple, Samuel found himself telling her stories of the war, of the wife he lost, of the silence that followed. Naya listened, her gaze distant but warm. "Pain," she said softly, "is a river. You cannot stop it, but you can learn how to cross." Samuel looked at her, struck by the quiet wisdom in her voice. "And you?" he asked. "What will you do now?" She looked toward the horizon where her people had gone. "They will not come back. I'm between worlds now." He nodded, understanding more than she knew. They were both between worlds, the living and the dead, the past and what might still be waiting. For the first time, he didn't feel alone in it. As weeks turned into months, Naya's strength returned, and with it came laughter, rare and soft, but real. She planted herbs near the porch, taught Samuel how to read signs in the wind, how to listen to the silence of the land. In return, he showed her how to mend a saddle, how to care for the horses, how to coax the old soil to bear fruit again. The ranch, once a place of ghosts, began to breathe. Neighbors who had long kept their distance began to visit again, curious about the quiet woman living with the rancher who once never spoke. By spring, the valley was alive again. Wildflowers bloomed where the rain had kissed the ground. Naya often walked barefoot across the grass, humming songs that Samuel didn't understand but loved to hear. One evening, as the last light of day faded, she stood by the fence looking west. "You saved more than me," she said softly, repeating the words she'd spoken that first morning. Samuel smiled, stepping beside her. "Maybe we both saved something," he said. She turned toward him, her eyes catching the glow of the setting sun. "Then let the land remember," she whispered. When summer came, the wind carried her voice through the canyons like a promise. Some nights, Samuel would wake and hear her singing outside, her voice mingling with the sound of the coyotes and the whispering grass. And one morning, when he found her gone, her footprints leading toward the ridge, he didn't chase her. He stood there, the wind tugging at his coat, and smiled. She had come from the dust, and to the dust she returned, free, whole, unafraid. But the ranch never went silent again. Her songs lived in the wind and in him. The desert had given him back his heart,